Welcome back, Visions fans. Ready Player Will here. We're finally reviewing Dark Leela, the brand new character released this week, and I do call her Dark Leela. I know it's not technically her name in-game, and I know there already exists a Dark Leela of a lesser rarity, but out of all the things you could call her, this is a quick and easy one, so I prefer it. Jumping into things, the review breakdown today is going to be the character overview, a base stat analysis, and then the report card for her. Some general thoughts that kind of encapsulate everything you'll hear about today. The class and job overview, where I go through the abilities in particular and what I think has the most value and what interactions they work well with. Then I have a segment called Evaluating the Dark Element, because they are starting to undergo some changes that everyone should be aware about, particularly if you're going for Dark Leela. And then we'll go through the notable vision cards, Esper's weapon optimization, and the Truststone Recommendations. So, a brand new Dark Element unit. They've given her the unique class of Dagger Dancer. She is a 100 cost unit, so her skills and kit are scaled appropriately for that value. She does have the Paladin and Pugilist subjobs as well, which are very helpful for her statistics and her passives. She does equip daggers and hats, cloths, and accessories with a move of 3 and a jump of 2, so she does have a little extra mobility there. From a status resistance standpoint, the only negative is 15% to pierce. The rest of them relatively strong. Now, her strongest being strike damage, not one you usually have to be concerned about at 20%, but the fact that she has 15, 10, and 5 to slash, missile, and magic, really great starting point for the most common types of attack types in the game. Now, she is a unit you will most likely have at 50 faith, not 97, so the status resistant elements, not as big of an issue, but 50% to blind, to slow, and then 10% to paralysis. Nothing too crazy there. Now we get into the base stats of things. Again, modern era of the game with Truststone passives and subvision cards and a whole bunch of things that scale off the base stats. It's more important than ever to kind of get an extra feel of where these characters get some of the most benefit when you equip those things on them. So from an HP perspective, she's actually not that bad. So the UR average is 2990, and she's sitting here at roughly about 3200 above that average. So she does have some nice durability from that perspective, particularly when you look at the cast of characters around her there, where she is in good company in terms of characters that are typically known for a little extra durability. Now we get into the attack side of things. Fantastic attack stat. She is top 10 base attack in the game. Average here you can kind of ignore. It's just the average of the top half to try to omit some of the magic users, but 421 is very competitive with some of the hardest hitting damage dealers in the game, so things will scale really well off of her attack stat. From an agility perspective, she is a little bit above average here as well, so 59 base agility compared to the UR average of 56. Nothing too crazy here. Just know that she's not a slow unit. She's not an incredibly speedy unit either innately. You can obviously get her to that point, but 59 is a good spot. The dexterity is actually really good, so she's 220 on the average of 199. That dexterity is high enough that you can rely on some critical hit damage from her, and definitely does feed into some of her overall accuracy as well. And then the luck perspective, she's almost exactly average, and this is actually slightly misleading when you consider some of her strengths, because typically the things that she's going to be good at, you would expect a higher luck stat here, or at least a base stat, and that's not the case. That being said, 170 is totally fine. It doesn't actually really affect much of her kit overall for reasons that we'll get into soon. Now, from the DPS report card perspective, effective HP, I'm giving her an A-. She's actually fairly durable, so she does have courage. She has an ability to restore 50% of her HP when it falls below 20% HP, so she's got some extra survivability that one time that she could do that. And then technically, when that courage is active, she gets an extra 20 AoE resistance. So for DPS, it's actually a handful of things that work really well in her favor. Now, she's definitely skewed a little bit more on the physical side of things. She does have some innate defense, 8 defense specifically, with a passive that can further boost it. And obviously, her resistances, they skew a little more on the physical side of things with only the 5% to magic and no innate spirit. But on the magic side, not terribly bad either, B-, but there's definitely ways you can bump that up. It's really just the fact that she has no access to additional spirit that kind of puts her down on that lower level of things. But her health pool is high enough that it does kind of compensate a little bit for that. The primary stat, I'm going an A+. She's amongst the highest in the game. So she has 616 total attack without equipping anything at all. And her high base attack will scale well with all of those vision cards and extra things that you can put on her to further increase that attack. So overall, really great starting point from the primary stat perspective. Agility, I'm giving her a C+. Again, kind of a hard one to really gauge, because obviously if you want a character to be well over 100 agility, you can really do it through a variety of espers and truststones and vision cards and things like that. But looking purely at the statistics, she doesn't have any agility boosting passives. And although her base stat is slightly above the average, well, so doesn't her total agility in the broad scheme of when characters can equip their passives and whatnot. So overall, it's C+, but you can definitely get that higher. From an accuracy, I'm going A+. She is, right now, effectively like one of the most characters, if not the most, potentially accurate character in the game, even without any guaranteed hit in her kit. So she does have 2 incredible accuracy passives. Even without them, she's still incredibly accurate because of her dexterity and a little bit bit of extra luck that she has. And then one ability does have an extra 30% chance to hit as well. So, although we're in a water meta at the moment, for those of you on the part of the ladder that still see a ton of evasion mono light, or just evasion in general, she's a fantastic unit to go against those evade teams. From an evasion perspective on that topic, she's actually a B+. So although she doesn't have the average amount of luck, she does on her mastery ability have a 15% luck up, essentially. It's always on, which is part of the reason why she's also so accurate, but also why she's actually this like B+ tier of evasion. Now the thing about the evasion when you're at this grade, when the game is in an evade meta, these characters don't do well. Because if you're in an evade meta and you see a lot of Leela, a lot of Zazan, a lot of Ketone, people will be gearing for accuracy to hit those characters, which means these B+ evade units are going to get hit by everything because people are gearing for more evasive units than them. But when you take a step back and go to a more regular meta, like we're seeing some places with a lot of earth being prevalent, a lot of lightning being prevalent, a lot of water that aren't really emphasizing the evasion, these B+ units actually do get some extra value because people aren't equipping as much accuracy as they would be in the past. So it's definitely a piece of her kit that you can certainly play with that matchup, and is part of her overall survivability as well, that if you can evade a hit or two, that's less damage she takes. Movement, I'm giving her B for that jump of 2. There's no other ways to really skew her movement, but that's absolutely fine. She's a really mobile unit overall. From a passives perspective, I'm actually giving her a B+. There are a couple that I don't really love. She's got a couple that are really good, but overall B+, nothing wrong with that. From a counter perspective, I'm giving her a C. It's not that they're bad, they're just very much average. Nothing wrong with that. From the overall kit perspective, though, giving her an A for a total final grade of an A. I think her kit does so many things really well. Statistically, she's obviously really well-rounded. There's really not a ton of like potent weaknesses in her kit, obviously, other than that, 15% pierce weakness, but even then, she's got enough defense to kind of compensate. There are ways to mitigate some of that pierce negative resistance. So yeah, supremely well-rounded character that has a ton of strengths. And that's kind of what we're going to go over here in the general thoughts. So a unit with an above average amount of survivability, which is kind of necessary in the new War of the Visions era, where we are seeing a lot of extra healing, a lot of extra self-sustain, protect and shell, regen, things of that nature. So she does have that, which is an immediate thumbs up. An amazing amount of utility as well. She does have a defense break of 30. She does have, most importantly, a Dispel buffs and haste AoE. And the Dispel buffs is incredibly important because a lot of characters that get their hate by applying a buff. There's a lot of characters that get certain extra benefits statistically by applying buffs, and this will dispel them. 50% chance that the enemy counter doesn't activate, so it's a reduction. So if you had a 16% chance to proc reflex, let's say, that's really an 8% chance, so that's really awesome for making sure that you can kill units when you need to. She does have a 70 healing power down that will also dispel protect on a single target, which is amazing for the current Velis meta we're seeing in a lot of places. And obviously a lot of tanks rely on protect for their survivability as well. She does have some pseudo tank potential. I'll get to that later. My definition, though, just for those that want to keep up with how I talk about things, to me, a tank is one that has either innate hate or it can definitely generate it on turn 1. So like Warrior Light or Engelbert, where they can definitely use a buff on turn 1 to get it, those characters to me are tanks. Pseudo tanks are those that have like Taunting Blade, where the hate isn't really reliable. You have to wait for someone to get in range. You got to make sure you have the right AP. It can be dispelled. There's a lot of things that go into it that make them a pseudo tank, and that has changed a little bit in the modern era with the subvision cards that Vow of Love can effectively give any pseudo tank a starting hate. So that argument kind of has a little bit less applicability now, but overall, the thing with her, she does technically have a Taunting Blade on the sub, and if you are looking at what the cast of characters you'll be using for the Dark cast is, she can kind of fill that role. It's not the kind of thing you're going to want to use all the time, but the potential is at least there. And then finally, she does have 2 sources of potential 38% slash resistance down, which is obviously super impactful for her and the other units will be using. And then the Pugilist subjob can bring a sneaky amount of raw damage. As we saw, she does have a very high attack stat. There are enough external sources of dark attack up, which will apply to this attack type, that overall, this is a nice little wrinkle in her kit as well. And then finally, in my opinion, she's definitely more for PvP than PvE. And a couple reasons why. She's got no multi-hit abilities, no agility or CT manipulation or slow abilities that you typically need to, reduce the turn order of an enemy. And then she does have some redundant utility with other dark units. So she's got that defense break. Great. There's like 4 or 5 other dark units that do too. That slash resistance in peril. Yes, Dwayne's is only 25% compared to her 38%, but regular Stern also has 38%. So it's not that she won't have a use. She's obviously a great slash unit, but I just think she's more geared for the problems you see in PvP than you really do on the PvE side of things. Now we get into the passive abilities. The two that are by far the best in my opinion. Number one, All in the Eyes is a must. Not only for the defense penetration of 40, but the accuracy of 25 is really what elevates her to the top of the game. My second favorite is the Warrior Spirit, where you get that extra 12% HP, and the attack 24% really jettisons her attack stat even higher. I am a fan of Holy Knight's protection in certain circumstances, because when you do see things like Mono Lightning right now, they really are very heavy physical damage dealers, so this will help against that. I'm less in love with beauty standards, if only for the reason that that slash resistance of 12% is really only about 7% for any character that has 40% slash resistance penetration. Obviously, if they go even higher, like Esther or even Elena potentially with some of the vision cards, that slash resistance really just doesn't get as much value. And the missile resistance kind of does get a reduction too, not as consistently, because not every missile unit has missile resistance penetration, but with the Diamond Cloak and some Truststone passive, things like that, this is a good passive, but to me it's just not the full value that you see on paper. And the Flurry Enhancement is just not good at all. I would never equip that. And we get to the counter abilities. Again, nothing that's really bad here. My biggest thing is really just the fact that the two offensive ones are only one square away. That's just kind of an odd counter ability. It's not one that you can really rely on to proc. Paladin's Guard, in my opinion, is by far the best one. And although I gave her a C for counters, that's not to indicate that Paladin's Guard is a bad passive. It's just an average passive. There's a lot of tanky characters that have it. It's a good one. Just nothing special. So to me, Paladin's Guard is definitely going to be my go-to overall. Now we get into the main job. We're going to go through some of the support abilities first, and then I'll go through the offensive abilities second. So support-wise, Little Leela's Tactical Training is one of her best abilities. This is the one that gives herself and allies a 50% reduction that the enemy will use their counter ability. In addition to that, it also increases her slash attack resistance penetration as well as the allies of 40, which is a massive damage buff when you consider how many slash type dark units there are. That's a big damage increase. And finally, I'm sorry, not even finally, there's two more abilities here. She will recover 50% of her HP when it's reduced to 20% or lower. And then finally, it also restores 20 AP. This is a absolutely nutty ability. I honestly can't recall an ability that's like 4 stellar things on it in just one. It's amazing. The second really good one here is the Pure Hearts Never Ever Die. This is the one that gives her courage and also gives her 20 AoE resistance while that courage is in effect. So obviously does a lot for her survivability. Now we get into the damaging abilities. Pretty Paralyzer is fine. It's pretty standard. It's nice that it has a status effect on it, but I don't think it's worth 97 faithing her, so the reliability of that status effect is kind of in question. Delightful Destruction is fantastic that it is her 30 defense break. It's got some good range. It's an AoE. Also has an extra percentage chance to hit, which is awesome because when you look at evade units, a lot of them are geared for evasion, not for defense. So they will get absolutely crushed by this defense break when it lands on them. Graceful Undoing is a fantastic ability. Definitely one of the more underrated ones where dispelling buffs for all those targets has a monumental effect in terms of what you can do for the balance of the fight. Like, you know, a couple enemies might use some buffs. The fact that you can just say, nope, ignore them, really does turn the tide in your favor. And then Little Leela's Secret Slash is also one of my favorites, where Dispel Protect obviously does a really great job at helping to kill the enemy tanks faster, which you kind of need as a dark element cast. And the decrease of healing power of 70 is big, particularly for the kind of healing meta that we're seeing at the moment. So overall, positively stellar main job. And the sub-job is actually not that bad either. So the Beautiful Blade Break, this is the one that has the on-demand 38% slash resistance in peril. This one's a little shorter in range. I don't know if I would typically have the sub-job equipped, particularly because this second ability is fine, but as we mentioned, she's not going to reliably use status effects, and out of the priority of which abilities are best, this one falls on the lower side. So this one's okay, but a little more niche to certain kinds of content. The Paladin job, also pretty good. Time and place for when you want to use it. To me, this is if you're really, again, going for kind of either the Sentinel or the Saintly Wall, where you really want to reliably bulk her up. Then again, you saw how many good buffs she has. The odds of you getting Saintly Wall off are relatively low, or at least like being able to use all 3 of them in conjunction with the main job ones. But the Taunting Blade here is really for kind of that strategic use. Finally, and my personal favorite, is the Pugilist sub-job. I just like that it varies up her damage potential, and then when you talk about, you know, how many things can you resist against, you have to pick. If you're with Joker and you're with Dark Fina, who we're going to talk about later, well, you can't resist all 5. You can't resist Missile and Strike and Magic, and like, you have to pick your battle. So Pugilist, I like because it's kind of like a sneaky extra way to do some damage here. Finally, the Limit Break. This is an absolutely amazing Limit Break, and one that I did not mention via the report card, but really deserves its own spot here. And the reason why I want to bring it up is because it does have a fantastic chance to inflict blind on people. So those that have a 50% resistance, it's obviously less odds to do so, but those that don't, it's basically guaranteed to blind them, which when we talk about being a B or B plus tier evade unit, when you blind your enemy, your evasion odds go significantly up. So if you are building her for that evade and Joker's evasion, and you're able to blind a tank, if not more, because it is technically an AoE, get a DPS in there, that's going to drastically increase your odds of being able to evade, which is kind of the goal at the end of the day when you're doing that. And in addition to that, if they are blinded, it also imperils them by 38% slash resistance. So that's kind of why I prefer this to the one of the Subjob, that this is decently reliable. The downside is you can only use it once. Now we get into her TMR. This is a cloth type piece of equipment. Overall stats, I like that there's 3 stats on here. The 15 crit evade is particularly important in my opinion, that you don't get your health chunked down as quickly and take that extra crit damage that a lot of people have. But more than that, this is a double cast ability, immediately fantastic for that reason. But the effect of agility up 25% in this massive AoE really does lend itself to a wide array of usage. So overall, 2 thumbs up for this TMR. I think there's going to be a lot of benefits to its use. And the master ability, this is where you get an extra 15% attack that puts her at that A+ level, and 15% luck, which does compensate and help her overall accuracy and evasion in the broad scheme of things. Now, evaluating the dark element, I want to start here because I want to evaluate Dwayne in particular, because that's kind of the motor that drives a lot of the mono element strengths. As we've seen over the time, obviously all 3 characters need to work well in conjunction, but more than anything, most elements rely on a really solid tank to make the car move. And right now, and for quite some time, Dark has been missing that, which begs the question, all right, Leela's out, well, does she really change things? And there's a new dark element, if you will, a new profile that is very much different from the old one. Now, historically, they've been absolute glass cannon. Just, we're going to demolish you in, if not 1 hit, 2 hits. We're going to be the fastest element you could possibly see. That was true for a while. But War of the Visions, since the Black Rose Elena meta, has changed significantly. Not only with all the balance changes that we've seen with Subvision cards, Truststones, things of that nature, but also just the new characters that have been introduced. And so we'll kind of circle back to the status of the tank and how we look at that, how we typically think about that. You can't think about the dark element in that way that you do other elements. It's a very outside the box way to approach them. So if we look at the tanks, based upon their survivability, I have a couple attributes here. So whether or not they can cast Protect Shell, if they can use unit or AoE resistance, if they have regen, barriers, and then other, which are other things. So we're going to go through a list of how I defined them earlier, a lot of these tanks that have innate hate. So King Mont, definitely power crept a little bit, at least has some AoE resistance, and does have an ability that can sometimes use regen. Rain, kind of the same idea, does have 50 AoE resistance, technically does have a magic barrier, some extra survivability there. Kind of cheating here with Freyavia. Her vision card technically gives her the innate hate, which I know is similar to Vow of Love, but since that Ice doesn't really have any other tanks until Agrias and Snow, I at least have her here, that she can sometimes use Protect and Shell. It's on her White Mage Subjob. She sometimes can use regen, it's there also, and then she technically does have a magic barrier also. Joom does have Protect and does have Shell, sometimes has unit resistance with the ability she can use, and then sometimes also does have a physical barrier as well. Charlotte also has Protect, also has Shell, has regen on that same ability, and she does have debuff resistance as well, which helps mitigate the imperils that she can take, like slash resistance down and dark resistance down. It's a big part of her survivability overall. Celeste obviously also does have Protect and Shell, sometimes also has the unit resistance on certain abilities. She does technically have a magic barrier and the Subjob, and then obviously Runic Blade is one of the most important parts of her kit, and she does have an ability that will dispel debuffs that have been applied to her. Engelbert does have a physical barrier, also has Courage, part of her survivability. Warrior of Light on his Limit Break does have Protect and Shell. Also has a regen ability as part of his EX upgrade. Does have a general barrier and a magic barrier. And he does have a self-heal as well. Which then leaves us to Dwayne. What does he have of these? Nothing. His Limit Break heals 50% of the damage done. So when you look at the modern era of all these elements and what they kind of require, Dark just simply doesn't have it. I know you might think of Whisper here too. Whisper is not a tank in that regard and literally completely power crept for PvP. And on the JP timeline, there is no Dark tank incoming unless it's a global exclusive again. This is what we get, which is why you kind of have to move forward with the times, if you will. So the increased survivability and sustain has nerfed Dark's offensive potency. The amount of courage that's available, the amount of Protect and Shell that's available, the amount of impenetrable resistances. There's way more AoE and unit resistance available now than there was during the Black Rose Elena meta. The apparels are also no longer really unique to them. That was one of the things that at the time, Black Rose Elena would come out and 38% dark apparel you, and if she didn't, Dwayne did, and it was just a massive source of damage. But nowadays, most elements have that kind of apparel, or at least various sources of it, so it's no longer a source of extreme offensive potency. It's kind of the norm now. And then evasion is no longer special to them. There was a time where Maidens of the Rose was a global exclusive vision card. It was only the second mono element vision card at the time to have 35% luck on it. Wind was the first one with Nier Automata. But at that time, that was way before Elena, and obviously evasion was a thing, but Dark was like notoriously the best at it, particularly from the Venera perspective, where she was just incredibly hard to hit. And so that aspect of high damage and evasion and so many ways to kill you just isn't as special to them anymore. But when you talk about the new Dark element, Dark Leela is a crucial part of that, maybe the most important part of that. Because when you think, you have to go kind of tankless in this regard, it's a very different X's and O approach to the battle. So there's some increased emphasis on matching their survivability in the modern war divisions. And as we saw with Leela, she's got courage and the self-heal. We're going to get to a couple examples here. That there's more complex kits with I'll use the word sneaky strengths. That's the adjective I'm going with here. But like you look at Joker, he does have AoE protect. He's also got damage reduction on himself. Hate -6 is really important, where you talk about maybe start off the battle on a second fight with decreased hate, kind of juggle around the hate overall. He's got the attack and magic break, so you take less damage overall. And he's got a variety of attack types, so they can still be offensively potent, just in a different kind of way. Dark Leela, as we've seen in this review, self-heal below 20%, courage, dispel buffs, dispel protects, healing power down. She's got blind to make up for their subpar evasion. So it's definitely kind of out of the box. And then Dark Fina, who's coming, does have Dispel Runic Shield, which will obviously be great against Celeste. She does have her own re-raise, 40 AoE resistance when her HP is above 70%. She's got a Devout Subjob, which is a whole different kind of support when you talk about, increasing debuff resistance and insta-heals and buffs to agility and attack and anything of that nature. And she does Dispel and Limit Break. So there's a lot of interesting things in their kit here that really have to work together in conjunction to make the whole wheel move. And that's not just unique to these 3 units. There are some older units that kind of do the same, just not to the same degree. Really and truly, like Prompto still does have his own kind of dispel, relies really heavily on status elements. Knight of Ruin Stern has a giant defense break that's also healing power down. Lemur technically is a Time Mage and White Mage, where she can cast Shell and Protect. She can also do Quicken and Haste. So there's some new ways to approach the Dark cast that really haven't been historically prevalent, and Dark Leela is a critical piece in that actually working. So hopefully that segue made some sense. We're going to get into the notable vision cards for Dark Leela now. Now, the best one, in my opinion, is one that's actually not released yet. It will be out next week. It is the Anima vision card. This is a new Esper that we're going to get. This is a fantastic vision card that to me would be a primary slot, where it gives unit resistance of 20, slash resistance penetration of 35, also gives dark attack while giving some amazing stats right all the way across the top. So 20 AP, great attack, 40 dexterity, 5 agility, 28 luck. All incredible stats while also giving her some dark attack to the unit. This to me is like the de facto best vision card you could possibly put on her. Now, somewhat similar in that regard is Maidens of the Rose, where it does give you the luck of 35%, dexterity 35%, which we saw she does have high dexterity, so more crit hits overall. And it does also have the 18 slash attack resistance penetration. So not exactly the same level that Anima has, but to me this is, if you're going for an evade, Leela, this is probably a great card to have as the primary card. If you're not, this is definitely still a great sub card to put on, where you will still get a ton of dexterity, the slash resistance penetration will still stack with Animas, and you'll still get buffs to her attack stat overall. And then after that, really in no particular order, you could certainly put on the Persona 5 vision card on her, where this is meant for Joker, but theoretically for agility, it's got some extra attack and accuracy. She will benefit from the man killer and the physical attacks, increase HP 25%. Overall, still a really strong dark vision card at the moment. I do also think Omega is still a really, really great one. Again, really awesome stats across the top. Increased agility to give her some extra speediness. Also has the magic resistance, which we saw as one of her weaker resistance types. So this is nice to kind of round out that weakness in particular, while also still giving slash attack and HP, which she will definitely benefit greatly from. Diabolos is definitely a great card for when you are going to potentially see that light come back to some degree. Again, we always talk about, depending on where you are in terms of your guild rank and whatnot, at the top end of the game, we've seen Mono Light subside a little bit, but for the majority of the rest of you, I'm sure it's still a very tricky thing to have to fight through. Diabolos is still great for that reason, and kind of on the note, I actually am a fan of Fleeting Blossom Banquet as a subvision card for her as well, where she will also still get some extra light resistance on the unit, but the extra acquired AP is really great for her and Joker, where, on that idea of having to kill things quicker, you really do so by being able to spam abilities. So the less times you have to basic attack, the better. So increased acquired AP goes a long way to helping that, and the crit damage obviously does too. That's kind of my opinion on all the cards in a nutshell. When it comes to other subvision cards, if you are going for that evade Leela, I do still like Demon Shimmer as a card overall, where it increases to luck, a little bit of agility, does have some unit resistance, and the crit rate is still there. And then I think a sneaky one that we have not been able to use in the modern recent history that we might, if you are seeing a lot of dark units come back and little uptick in a dark meta, is the Shadowbringers card, where you get that 15% dark resistance to party and then 15% strike resistance as well, which you saw is one of her subjobs. So if you are seeing a lot of little Leelas with some strike damage in there, this certainly can help just a little bit. Now we get into the Espers. Again, most notably, the de facto best one in my opinion for is the Anima Esper. Overall, just fantastic stats here. 17 agility, really great amount for luck here, and although the attack isn't as high as it could be compared to some others, it's fine. The skill tree, it's dark attack, and then slash resistance, as well as some crit evasion depending on how you want to build that. But we are in a slash heavy meta at the moment, so this card does so much to really let her thrive in that environment. On that same related note of current slash meta, I think Golden Armament is one of my other underrated favorites, where you can build this for defense and slash resistance and some crit evasion. So I'm a big fan of this Esper for her as well, given what we're seeing currently. The default best DPS is still the Odin Esper, 4 DPS, slash attack, man killer, missile resistance or slash resistance or accuracy, which she doesn't need, but obviously is there. And then if you end up going for that more evasion oriented build, Dark Odin is absolutely stellar for her, where you get that extra evasion from the Esper while also still getting the slash attack and human killer potentially. And that's true obviously for the rest of the evade Espers as well, where Demon Shimmer, Glacial, Tetrasulfid just to a lesser degree. And then obviously after that, the Espers are really dependent upon your matchups if you need certain kinds of resistances or certain kind of agility tuning. Now we get into notable weapons. There's actually been an influx of additional daggers recently to talk about. We'll start off with her particular weapon, so the Swordbreaker. Now this passive ability that comes with it is a 30% chance that the counter doesn't activate, that will stack with her buff, so effectively 80% chance it doesn't activate. The reason why I'm 50-50 on this is because you can still, on a Truststone passive, get 20% chance the counter doesn't activate, and a lot of people have been building that up, so this won't stack with that. And the rest of the stats, 10 slash attack is fine, but there are some higher modifiers. And then 195 attack. This number might pop out at you, but a lot of daggers are actually in that realm, so this is not particularly noteworthy for its attack stat. If you're going for that extra defense penetration, I am a big fan of Locke's Dagger as well, just to cleave through that tank even quicker, which is really important because, again, you want to kill things very fast. You can't spend 3 to 4 turns trying to kill a tank. You got to do it really quickly. So I like this one a lot for that reason. Again, kind of the same as last time, though. You can still get 10 defense penetration on Truststone passives, which won't stack with this. And this does have 20 less attack, so it's really debatable the effectiveness of it. But for those that don't have that Truststone passive, definitely a good dagger still. Mage Masher is absolutely classic. 186 attack and 15 slash attack up on it. Really like that. The main Gauche, which we kind of talked about, is a sneaky dagger for those of you that have been buying it in the shop, that if you are going for the evasion Dark Leela, this does have a chance to help her do that with the 20 evade on it. Obviously, you kind of take a nerf on the attack stat, but this is more of a strategic piece. And then finally, the Blood-Soaked Daggers actually come back to prominence with the Truststones and whatnot, where Dark Killer does have some potential usage if you do see a little bit of that mirror matchup, and it does still have that 15 evade, which certainly is helpful when you're talking about trying to gear some of her for evasion. So all of these pieces really could work together depending on the build you're going for. I am personally partial, though, to the Swordbreaker or Locke's Dagger or Mage Masher. Now we get into the Truststone recommendations. There's actually a massive variety which work really well for her, because as we've seen, there's a couple different builds you can go with. So number one, the HP one, definitely a great Truststone. Obviously, she does have a high enough base HP that she will get benefit from this. The elemental resistance obviously is great for taking less damage too, but I am particularly partial, and I'll circle back onto why, on the defense and spear ones as well, depending on the strategic matchup you're seeing, where again we are seeing a lot of physical damage dealers. We are seeing a lot of slash oriented damage on them. So the extra defense, 15 defense when you equip the set, is impactful. That healing power of 10, don't forget it though. I'm going to come back to that in a second. And finally, if you are going for the evade Leela, you have to go for the 15% lock. So that's obviously kind of a given if you're going for that build. Now the passives for the left side, I don't really have anything in particular that's like a must-have for her. There's a lot of ones that are just generally good that you should have no matter what. Obviously, the evade build, you need the 10% luck passive. HP 10% is great. You can go for defense debuff resistance because a lot of defense prevalent in the game at the moment. A lot of things you can go with. Nothing really impactful though that's unique to her. On the right side of things, though, I am the biggest fan of the AP Truststone set for offensive-oriented characters. Although a lot of people lean toward the attack one, that to me is really more for PvE when you're trying to max certain kinds of damage. But the AP Truststone just allows you to, again, spam more abilities, and when you need to kill things quickly, to me it's more impactful to get an extra ability off than for one ability to just do maybe a couple extra 100 hit points worth of damage, particularly when there's so much healing around in the game right now. That being said, I also am a fan of the crit rate one as an offensive one, where again, if you're talking about being able to burst enemies down, the extra crit damage and the crit rate certainly helps. Now, when we talk about which passives you want to hunt for, the one that I really want to emphasize here, and again, I just did this whole video on it, is the Healing Power 10. Now, the thing with, again, if you haven't seen my video, go to my channel. I literally just posted it last week explaining how Healing Power works. If you give her a Healing Power passive here, and you equip the Defense Stone or the Spirit Stone, that is effectively 20 healing power. When she does her self-heal, when she falls below 20%, since she is the caster and the receiver, it'll technically be doubled because you get 20 for casting, 20 for the target. So she gets 40 healing power up on that. What that means is, instead of regenerating 50% of her health pool, she will regenerate 70% of her health pool. And when you're talking about Dark that may not have a dedicated healer, to me that's a lot of extra healing to make sure she doesn't die again as quickly. So I'm a big fan of those combined together overall. And that's the Dark Leela review altogether. This is a obviously really great unit. She's a big piece of the future of the Dark cast. I can't say that she's necessarily meta defining quite yet, because again, she is kind of a cog in the wheel of what makes Dark work. But of the next 4 to 6 months, she is a character that is going to have some relative strength when geared for properly and put into the right comp. So as usual, comments, questions, critiques, all in the comment section below. Really appreciate all the feedback you give, and I will talk to everybody soon.